I want to talk briefly about joint compounds and tape. It's a very important topic because the joint compound is the adhesive that holds the tape in place, and the tape is what also gives the strength between all the joints and inside corners. So embedding the tape in the right compound is extremely important. Also, there are different compounds for all your finish coats. When you talk about taping, typically you're referring to the whole process from embedding the tape to the finish coat all the way to the point where it's ready to prime and paint. But I'll start out by talking about the different types of compounds. There are basically two different types. There's a setting type, which comes in a bag. It's a dry compound that you mix with water. This sets up chemically, so in other words, it will harden up very quickly. Like this is a 90. They always have a number on it. This is a 90, so you have a working time of probably around 90 minutes. Now once it sets up, you can actually put another coat of joint compound over the top of it. So a setting compound is great for those jobs where you're trying to move things along rather quickly. But in any case, you still would have to have this totally dry before you could decorate, before you could prime or paint. It's also a great compound for filling. Like let's say I'm going to tape this house today. I would mix up a pan full of setting compound and walk through and fill any gaps that are larger than 1/8 of an inch. So that allows me to start taping right away. So that's what a setting compound is for. It's a pretty strong compound. The other type of compound is a ready mix compound. In other words, it comes in a bucket or a box and it's already got water mixed with it. It's basically pretty much ready to use right out of the bucket, although I always mix the compound before I start using it. But I use two different types of the ready mix compound. One for embedding the tape and one for my finish coats. I'll talk about this heavier compound that I use for embedding the tape. It is the heavy compound. It's like the original all-purpose compound. This bucket here weighs over 60 pounds. It's the best for embedding the tape because it's the strongest. It shrinks a little bit. It pulls that tape in nice and tight. But it's not as sandable, so it's not as friendly of a compound for all your finish coats. So after the tape is embedded and this compound is dry, I apply the lightweight compounds for my finish coat, a fill and then a thin finish coat over top of that. I like the lightweight compounds for all my finish coats because they dry pretty quickly, they shrink less, and they're easy to sand. The key thing is, to me, it's much easier to sand. So that's a brief description of the compounds I use. There is quite a variety of ready mix compounds. They have the lightweight, they have the midweights, they have a lightweight embedding compound, but this is basically what I use. It's very simple. Heavyweight for embedding the tape, lightweight for my finish coats. Now I want to talk about different types of tape. The most common tape used is your paper tape. It's a pre-creased paper tape. Comes in 250 foot or 500 foot rolls. It's got a crease down the middle. Pretty easy to use. Some people have problems with the paper tape because they get little air bubbles behind it. But it's the least expensive and it's probably the most commonly used tape out there. I would say definitely the most commonly used tape. It's what I use. I use it for years on all of my homes and any drywalling job for inside corners as well as seams. But a few years ago, a company came up with a different type of tape. It's called Fiberfuse joint tape. It's a fiberglass mat. It's not a weave. It's actually a mat. And it gets embedded just like the paper tape. It's used in all the same ways. It's embedded in a compound. It can be used on inside corners as well as seams. It's a little bit stronger. It's also quite easy to embed. And it works great with all my automatic taping tools. So the FiberFuse is a tape that if you're having troubles with air bubbles behind your paper tape, you might want to try using the FiberFuse fiberglass matte tape. You're going to eliminate the problem with the air bubbles. The other type of tape that's been very common for many years is the self-adhesive mesh tape. It is a different process than with the paper and the fiberglass matte. It's self-adhesive, so this goes on the seams first and then it is coated with a joint compound. Traditionally, the fiberglass mesh tapes have not been as strong as the paper tape. So in order to give it the extra strength that is needed, these tapes always had to be embedded in a setting compound. So if I was using mesh tape, I'd be using a setting compound. This is changed slightly over the years. They've developed stronger mesh tapes. Here is a tape called Perfect Finish. It's probably the strongest version of mesh tape. It's got a very fine weave, and it can actually be embedded in a all-purpose heavyweight compound. But there again, I only do that under very good conditions. Taping, should be done under the best conditions. You don't want to have the temperature just above freezing, or you also don't want it to be 100 degrees in here either. And you want to control the humidity and airflow, but that's kind of like a whole other topic. What I use a lot of is this extra strength mesh tape as well. This is, I just said this is probably the strongest, but I'm not sure. This is probably just as strong. And I do embed this in an all-purpose heavyweight compound. Unless, of course, I'm on a job site where I'm in a bit of a hurry. Then I always embed the mesh tape in a setting compound that allows me to keep the job moving. I think that's pretty much it for the tape and the compounds. The only thing I might add is people always ask me about how much water do you add to the compound if you're going to thin it down for any reason. And that kind of varies. It depends on how thick you want it. It depends on how thick it is when it comes out of the bucket. But always mix your compound before you start using it. It just makes it much easier to work with. Okay, everybody, thank you.